International Media TV, television that listens to you.
It is a great day for a celebration. Hello, everyone. My name is Maurice Cox, and I had the great pleasure of having known Price for more than 33 years. You know, sometimes people come into your lives. People come into your lives in special ways. You think about people who come into your lives and, you know, you're swept away. You think about the person who comes into your life who literally takes your breath away, whether or not that's a partner or a spouse. And then, of course, there are others who come into your life and they give you a new outlook. They give you a new perspective on things. They literally change your trajectories, and they help you to unravel the mysteries of life. Price was that kind of person who came into my life. My guess is you will hear that narrative throughout today from many of our speakers. Now, my job is a simple one. Freddie has indicated to me that our friendship from this point forward will be based on my ability to end this program on time. She's serious. She has said to me, I do not want an Aretha moment. We've got things to do. We've said our goodbyes. We've said our goodbyes already. We have a number of terrific speakers today, and I've given them some guidelines. And I've already shared with them that if for some reason they run over the time, they'll see me get up. And if they continue to speak, then we will have an embrace here on stage. But it's all going to be great. And now I want to introduce you to Frederica Cobbs. She is an amazing woman of strength and character, and we all love her so dearly. Bernard, would you help her?
Well, hello, everyone. It's so nice to see all of you, and I'm very happy that you could make it this morning. I know that Price would be very honored. I also want to thank Maurice. I don't know where he disappeared to. Oh, you're right there. Oh, well, no wonder I can't see you. I want to thank Maurice and his committee. They made this day possible. So thank you, everyone.
Okay, wait, before you go on. I would now like to bring up to the stage Tatiana Kalinga. She's representing Congressman Barbara Lee and also Minority Leader Pelosi, and she's going to present a special proclamation.
Hello, ma'am. I'll leave this here. Just want to show you. Do a little speech. Before I do the official presentation, thank you, Ms. Frederica, to the friends, family, colleagues of Dr. Price Cobbs. I am humbly here on behalf of Congresswoman Barbara Lee. My name is Tatiana Kalinga. I'm her district director here, based in Oakland. And on behalf of Leader Nancy Pelosi, we present this CR, which is a congressional record, on behalf of both our offices to the family of Mr. Dr. Price Cobbs.
Thank you. I wasn't expecting this, and I know Price would be double honored.
Thank you. Thank you. So we just wanted to note that this is a small tribute to a great man and a giant in the Bay Area who's done so much for, whether it's ELC, to the Black community, from Black Rage to the Jesus Bag. So thank you very much for his contributions to society. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much.
I can carry that down if you'd like to.
My relationship with Price began when I wrote a long article about him for a magazine of the day. We started talking, and for 47 years, we never stopped. I'm going to read 4 very brief passages from the interview of that time, which was January of 1973. And as the themes will be repeated, Marie said, Price was not only a loyal, irreplaceable friend, he was also an invaluable mentor, as I know many of you here experienced as well. When I became the editor of Mother Jones magazine, he was the very first person I asked to be on the board of directors because I knew he would always tell me the truth straight up. That was Price. He'd tell you the truth straight up. So these 4 questions and answers, very brief, from a very long interview. They're insights into Price's advocacy, his fierceness, his contempt for knee-jerk psychiatrists, and his deep, therapeutic, always persevering nature. 1, question. In the course of individual therapy, is there any special relationship you have to your patients? Answer. Advocacy. If your patients come from groups which realistically feel and have been oppressed, then to me it is necessary that you declare yourself in whatever way the therapeutic situation dictates that you're on the side of the patient. 2, fierceness. Are you confident that you're making progress with your patients? Do you think most other psychiatrists are making significant progress? No. Once I saw a black construction worker who had been hurt on the job with a back injury. He was married, had 3 or 4 kids, was involved with his family, and by the criteria of our society, he was stable, very straightforward. I looked at the chart, and the previous psychiatrist had said he was an alcoholic. I couldn't understand it. I had the patient come back 2 or 3 times before it dawned on me. He was a laborer. So maybe he drank on Saturday with friends around the corner before he came to the doctor. But when he went to the doctor smelled alcohol on his breath, and he said, "This man's an alcoholic." Well, just honest interest in that patient, looking at him physically, or simply an adherence to the very history that psychiatrist took would have told him the patient was not an alcoholic, but the diagnosis was on the basis of an odor, independent of a person. Well, I don't give a damn what that psychiatrist's training is. Hack, and he ought to be drummed out of town. Question. Do you think white psychiatrists should discuss racial problems with their white patients? Hell yes. And finally, 4. Why haven't you become cynical? Make it analogous to studying cancer. You might study cancer for 50 years, gain a little more insight and knowledge, yet never get to the basic etiology. We're working to eradicate something before it eradicates us and others. Thank you.
Madam Supervisor.
Good morning, family. I guess I don't get an introduction. Thank you, Mr. Cox. It's okay. I'll take it from here. I'll just add 30 seconds on my time. How are you today? It's a privilege to stand before you. My name is Malia Cohen. I'm a native San Franciscan, and I'm a member of the Board of Supervisors. I've been elected to serve for 8 years and just recently was elected president of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. So it's with great pride that I stand before you. Mrs. Cobbs, I have a few thoughts that I'd like to share with you. First, I bring you greetings on behalf of our beloved Mayor, London Breed. She's written a letter for you. I'd like to read it if you don't mind. Dear Mrs. Cobbs, on behalf of the City and County of San Francisco, I would like to to offer my deepest and sincerest condolences on the passing of your husband, Dr. Price Cobbs. Dr. Cobbs was an important part of our community, and he dedicated much of his life to advocating for racial equity and inclusion. His commitment to researching and writing about the long-term effects of slavery and the systemic racism highlighted both his strong and compassionate character, and also his commitment to the betterment of society. Additionally, he worked as a psychiatrist in San Francisco, which was critical, and he was critical to the tailoring of the field of psychology and acknowledgement and addressing the needs of African Americans. We appreciate the detail, the thoughtfulness in which he approached his work, which will continue to serve as an example for future generations of medical professionals, policymakers, advocates, and advocates for social justice. His family, friends, and colleagues, as well as the communities who have had the privilege of knowing and working with Dr. Cobbs, will miss him dearly. And I hope that you will take comfort in the many special memories you have of him. Please know that his advocacy has had a lasting effect on not only San Francisco, but the entire country, and that we are grateful for his life and his contributions. With warm regards, Mayor London N. Breed. And I would like to acknowledge that Tuesday coming up, we will be closing the board meeting out in honor of Dr. Cobbs. I have a proclamation that I want to present to you on behalf of the City and County of San Francisco, as well with my colleagues on the Board of Supervisors. There are several whereas clauses, but I won't read them all, but I will read the important one. Dr. Price Cobbs dedicated his career as an acclaimed psychiatrist and best-selling author and civil liberties leader. He served San Francisco for 6 decades as a well-respected psychiatrist, researching the psychology and impacts of racism and slavery on African American communities. Dr. Cobbs served as a significant force in the field of diversity and studies. Be it resolved that the San Francisco Board of Supervisors recognizes his contributions on serving the people of the City and County of San Francisco. So be it resolved that we proclaim Dr. Cobbs an amazing man. In closing, I just want to thank the family for your contribution. Many times when you have people that dedicate their life to a life of service, family often suffers, children and grandchildren and their spouses. And I just want to say thank you for sharing him with us. And his legacy most certainly lives on, certainly in my office and the practices and as a policymaker here in our city and county. And I would say that even more so now, we need to remember the lifelong teachings of Dr. Cobbs. Thank you.
The instructions were, I was supposed to tell you who I am. That would take longer than the Aretha moment. I'm Willie Brown, and I must tell you that I'm here because I lost a contributor. Price Cobb donated to my campaign, and it's always difficult when my contributors start leaving before I'm leaving. And when they said you could speak for a minute and a half, that's also very difficult. Price Cobb, however, was so unique. He came along at the time when the civil rights movement and the quest for equal justice and the incredible participation of young people, particularly students, were doing what they were doing. And he came along at a time when there was nothing available on the treatment side for those of us who were ill, emotionally, mentally, and otherwise. And Price Cobb addressed all of that. He really was incredibly unique, and I'm just pleased that I knew him, that I loved him, that he loved me, that our families knew each other, our children knew each other, and we were all right here in San Francisco. That still needs to be reformed.
So, Willie, you made me lose my first joke because I thought you were going to be speaking a little longer. So thank you very much. I'll take my extra minute. So let me start by saying Price and I met over 30 years ago. I don't know where the time goes, but we were both speaking on a panel in Cleveland. And Freddie remembers that, and we were on the bus together. And for those of you who know Price, man, he gets to know you in a very short order. And so that conversation on the bus on the way to speak on this panel on diversity and affirmative action, he learned that I had been married for about 15 years. He knew about my teenage sons. And we got into an interesting conversation because part of it was, here was this woman in business, and she had such a passion about her husband and her children. And knowing Price and how he truly understand the challenge that Black men faced, my husband and my sons found a new friend that day. And not just a friend, but family. And he'd always ask about Rich and the kids. And over time, it was interesting, as our sons got older and the younger one moved out here to California and lived in El Cerrito, he connected with Price in such a big way. And they used to have their brown bag lunches. And I knew my son was in good hands. And he's even, I'll take it forward now, where he met our nephew, Chris. And he liked to listen to Chris and talk to Chris about what was happening, and again, embraced him as family. So I want to move quickly from who everybody knows as the wise Price and talk about the wine-loving Price. And in particular, you know my brother loves champagne. So we had an opportunity, Rich and I, to travel with Freddie and Price in Paris. And we decided one day to take them to our favorite place in the city of Reims in the Champagne region. And we went to lunch and had some of the best champagne ever. And then we decided to go on a tour of Champagne at the Moet and Chandon, which also makes Dom Perignon. Honestly, it was the first time Rich and I had really gone to see how they make champagne. And it was an amazing, amazing afternoon. And the one thing that has continued to happen is, over the years, Price and Freddie and I would get together. And by the way, the other thing I really learned from Price was just how special a loving spouse can be. Whether it was his relationship with Freddie that I always admired, or mine with Rich, he just was such a full person. He was there for everybody, but most importantly, he was there for his spouse and his family. And so we'd get together occasionally whenever we were in town, or we'd have them at the Cape or in Boston, and wine was a big part of that. And champagne was a big part of that. To the point where, I guess, Price one day ordered an inferior champagne for Freddie. And Freddie told him about it. Surprise. And at that point, Price said to Rich, "Man, you have ruined me. You have ruined my wife." And I want to say ruined, okay, because that's what he said. So the one thing I want, and Price knows this already, we will make sure that Freddie continues to stay in fine champagne. And we're starting today.
Good morning. My name is Cheryl Luke. My tribute to Price is not going to be about his incredible career as a noted psychiatrist or a celebrated author or a respected management consultant. Instead, I would like to share with you a few vignettes about the Price I knew when we grew up in South Central Los Angeles in an all-black neighborhood. These reflections made it clear to me when we first met in our early teens that Price was going to be somebody special. I'm going to take you back a moment, a few years, to 1946. Price, along with his high school classmate, Vernon Dancy, and yours truly, won 4-year scholarships to UCLA at a time when the tuition was $29 a semester. And that's exactly what we did. We used to laugh a lot about our $29 scholarships. But, we wound up joining the scholarship awarding fraternity Kappa Alpha Psi. While commuting to UCLA one day, when we were freshmen, in my old 34 Ford, Price and I were stopped by the LAPD, and we were forced to stand spread eagle against the wall at a busy intersection. As one officer searched my car for contraband, the other held us at gunpoint. It was not until our release that we were told that the reason for the stop was that we fit the description of 2 suspected burglars. Price, with his even then elevated social consciousness, aptly labeled this experience as racial profiling. And this was long before that phrase had gained currency as an act for social justice. As a freshman at UCLA, I was a Yell leader. And so I encouraged Price to become involved in campus activities. He decided to join what was called the Homecoming Committee, whose primary function was to decorate floats for the Rose Bowl parade. But at his first meeting of this committee, which was held on Sorority Row, Price, being the only black student present, felt so out of place in the cultural milieu of the others in attendance that he left the meeting before the decorating began, feeling like the invisible man whose presence went unnoticed. Needless to say, Price moved on from that bad experience to find much more socially significant ways to distinguish himself. Sophisticated, earthy, urbane, Price was a person to whom relationships came easily. During our UCLA days and thereafter, at UC Berkeley, where he and I were roommates at iHouse, we frequently double dated on weekends. And our various partners usually were best friends. Sometimes they were sisters. And in one instance, they were identical twins. Among other things, Price loved jazz and the legendary musicians who created this great art form. As college students, we used to drive from Berkeley in the fall to the Monterey Jazz Festival to hear the blues singer Price identified with most. His name was Jimmy Witherspoon, or Spoon, as we used to call him. And Price often tried to emulate Spoon's raw singing style when he was acting out at parties. After settling down to marriage and family and professional pursuits in different cities, Price and I kept in touch regularly by phone. We talked about many things, but mostly politics, a subject about which Price had a lifelong passion that led to his becoming a very astute political pundit. In closing, everything that was said during my many conversations with Price over the years, those conversations always ended up with a family update. Price was a family man. He was a loving husband to his wife, Freddie, a caring father to his daughter, Renata, and son, Price P., a father figure to his stepdaughters, Jan and Jill, and a very proud grandfather to his 8 grandchildren. Our hearts and prayers go out to the Cobbs family. We love Price dearly, as you do. Our lives will never, never be the same without him. Thank you.
It's our experience with Price, which was really to do a lot of teaming in terms of the work that we did together. So being up here as a duet is very apropos. And in addition to that, we thought we might share a bit of the humorous side of our experience of working with Price, and then also something about Price that really inspires us and holds us anchored as we go forward today. So I'm going to do a quick little outtake. So I want you to envision being at Silverado Golf Club. It's kind of a upscale, poshy kind of place. And Price and I are presenting to a group of Chevron executives based upon the data we collected on some research we did. And so they're out there in the audience all waiting for this very distinguished gentleman and myself trailing along behind to come and enlighten them about what we learned. And behind the scenes, so this is an outtake, like in TV, they have those outtake moments where you don't see what's really going on. Nobody knew, but behind the screen, behind the curtain, Price and I are frantically collating and stapling our handout because there was a problem in getting the materials to us. So we're just going frantically trying to do all of this. And then Price kind of cracks up and I said, "What's so funny?" Because I'm just in high stress. He said, "I was just thinking of my mother and how she would be turning over in her grave if she saw her physician's son struggling here to collate and staple stuff to hand out." And I said, "Well, if she's like my mother, she would have said, 'Suck it up and get it done.'" I turn it over to one.
Thank you, Kate. That's a hard one to follow. Actually, I have 2 stories. So one, I call the earring. And what I mean by the earring is that a group of us in 1981 were invited to come and work with Price at PMS, and he had asked us to put on a Latino career development program. So for a day, he was walking us through the program, and giving us the core concepts and letting us know it would be up to us to evolve the program, but that, you know, he was going to put it together in terms of some key areas. So we thought, wow, this is great. So, you know, most of us were either working for mental health or nonprofits. So this would have been our first introduction to corporations. And so what I found that was so remarkable was his humor and his sage way of kind of giving you a message. And we all know that he would give us different messages at different times. And sometimes, well, in my case, I missed it.
That's not uncommon.
So we go through the program, my mind is blown by this wisdom. I go, wow, this is the sage of corporate America. And then he would just like poo-poo all that stuff. But then we were walking, and so he said to me, how long have you had an earring? And I was like, well, since I was in Berkeley. He goes, oh, your Berkeley and my Berkeley were quite a bit different. And I said, yeah. So he got all this interest, and then he finally ends up and he goes, do you wear it all the time? Took me about a day to realize that he wasn't being judgmental. He wasn't saying, don't wear it. But you might want to consider how you would be viewed if you walked into corporate America in '81 with an earring, right? And so I was like, oh, okay. And he would tease me about that later on because it took me so long to get it.
Also not unusual.
So the second story is a bit more serious, and I think it's just a testament to not only his brilliance, but the impact that Price had on the field of psychiatry and mental health. Because Price, and Mr. Klein alluded to it, as a psychiatrist, he introduced something called ethnotherapy, which ultimately was included in the DSM, which is a fancy word for mental health diagnostic manual. But his ability to introduce ethnotherapy, not only to speak about the African American experience in North America, but it opened the door for many other ethnicities and racial groups to begin to talk about the impact of being in a society that doesn't always value you, and allows us to begin to talk about what are the impacts of internalized depression. And that's what Price talked about, which was big, I believe, for PMS, was, you know, just how all of that impacts what goes on. So in that respect, I will always appreciate the brilliance of how he introduced that and began to introduce cultural competency and making a difference going towards diversity, equity, and inclusion. Okay?
Yeah, I just wanted to share a bit, because Price and I would hang out periodically and just sit and have lunch and chat downstairs in that wonderful office, right? And so, but you know, our last conversation, the things I wanted to share with you that really kind of anchor and inspire me, I went to see a healer, and she was saying, you have a lot of stress in your neck and your shoulders. And I said, yeah, it's from listening to the news every morning. She said, you need to stop listening to the news. But one of the conversations we last had together, we were talking about this current administration, and as imperfect as this democracy is, how fragile it is, and how it is under a real assault in terms of, and we talked about what does that mean and what do we need to do. And we did come up with some ideas, but what I always hang on to in my darkest moments, looking at what's going on in the country, is he said, Kay, you know, I marched in Selma, and I want to tell you, we are on the right side of history.
Good afternoon, I guess, or still morning. My name is Ken Coleman. I'm from down the road in Silicon Valley. I want to be a little bit personal here. I've known Price for 40 years, So I was a very young professional at HP when I first met him. We all know that Price is wise, insightful, empathetic. But I'm going to share with you 4 times in my career that he had enormous impact on me. The first was, I was the 4th employee when HP decided to get in the commercial computing business, and we had done a great job of being quite diverse a long time ago, before it was fashionable. And I had this dilemma that I went to talk to Price about it. And the dilemma was, we had more than our fair share of black professionals in this division, and the whites in the organization were putting pressure on me, saying there are too many black people, and the black people were calling me an Oreo. And it was really hard, and I was depressed. I went to see Price, and Price says, he gave me a very important lesson. Are you doing the right thing? Yes. Are you doing the best you can? Yes. Then don't carry that baggage. That's somebody else's baggage. Leave that baggage behind. That was a very important thing I got from Price. The second thing was, I was an early employee in the first video game software company called Activision. And we were growing very fast, and I was feeling, again, the pressure. And I went to Price and says, you know, I feel this awesome responsibility that's very challenging. And he looked at me, as Price could, and said, Ken, awesome responsibility is being a husband and being a parent. So thank you, Price. I was in my early 50s, and I went to Price and says, I'm thinking about when I'm going to retire. And he says, retire? He says, remember, age is just a number, and you should retire when you feel like it. It's not an objective, so I'm still at it now. And the last thing is, I want to share with you, when I was in my late 50s, I decided to start a company and go get funded. I went to Price and had him this question. I said, Price, I'm not sure that the venture capitalists on Sand Hill Road will fund an old black guy. And Price looked at me and says, Ken, given your reputation and your experience, why would you not feel entitled to be able to raise money? I raised $3 million on 12 slides in 90 days. All right. So Price, I often get asked, you were early as a black man in Silicon Valley, and how was it? And when I think about that, I realize I had a lot of friends and colleagues and supporters, but I was on bookend by my wife, Caretha Coleman, on one hand, and Price on the other hand. So Price had enormous impact on my life and success. He was my guiding light and helped me confront my fears, a role model that influenced my life, a confidant that I could talk to about anything. He not only made me better professionally, but also personally as a husband, a father, and a friend. And I'll forever be grateful for having known Price Cobbs. Thank you.
Good morning, all. Freddie, Renata, Price, family, thank you for asking me to do this today, to speak about our friend Price Cobbs. My name is Terrence Clark, and I am a writer and a novelist, and also, as the publishing industry will call it, I am a developmental editor. That's not the kind of editor who reminds you to cross your T's and dot your I's. Rather, it's an editor who will work with a writer about things like flow, language. This chapter is good, but you need another character in here to make it be better, or you need to get rid of those characters in that chapter. Feelings, emotions, and so on. That's what a developmental editor does. And very often it can lead to extremely fruitful and long conversations over a few years with the author, between the author and the editor. And that's what it was like for me and Price. I was a developmental editor on this book, My American Life. I'm going to tell you a story briefly that appears in the book, but it was a story that especially touched me with what it told me about Price and also what it told me about our relationship, which was a very special one for me. As almost everyone here knows probably, Price's father also was a physician, Dr. Peter Price Cobbs. He was one of the first black physicians to practice in Los Angeles. Price told me that he was a formal man, his father, de rigueur, coat and tie, every day, including Sunday, of course. Price said he had his father had a fine speaking voice, singing voice, and that he especially enjoyed going to the church services on Sunday where he would listen to and sometimes participate in the hymns and the gospel songs that they would play or sing. He also was a devoted fan of the poetry of Paul Laurence Dunbar and had memorized many poems by Dunbar and would recite them from memory at family gatherings or whenever he was asked and so on. One day, Price's father was talking with Price, and this would have been in 1938 or 40, so Price was about 11 or 12 years old. And he said, "Price, I've got a patient who's just been admitted to such and such a hospital. It was a big public hospital in Los Angeles. And I'm going to go visit him tomorrow. Price, would you like to come with me?" Well, Price, the young boy, was thrilled. He'd never been asked by his father to do something like this before. So the next morning, Price got out of bed, dressed up in coat and tie, just like his father. They got into the car and they drove to the hospital. They parked in the lot and they were headed to the front door of the hospital. And Dr. Cobbs had what those of us of a certain age here today will remember as the little black bag that physicians would carry when they were making house calls or calls outside of their office. They were approaching the front door of the hospital. And as they got there, Dr. Cobbs tapped Price on the shoulder and said, "Here, Price, this way, this way." And they turned to the right, and they walked down the front of the hospital, to the back of the hospital, and in through the tradesman's entrance. Price was surprised, but he was a boy. He didn't want to say anything. He didn't know. So they entered the hospital. They walked up some back stairs. They found the room where the patient was, entered the room. The patient was a white man. And he shook Dr. Cobbs' hand, thanked him for coming, shook Price's hand, thanked him for coming. And then Dr. Cobbs gave him a hands-on examination, asked a number of questions, offered suggestions and so on. He wanted to know what was happening, why are you here, and so on. And perhaps he wrote a prescription, and then the two men left, Price and his father. They walked down to the stairs in the back of the hospital, down the stairs, and out the tradesman's entrance. Price told me once that he could always tell when his father was disturbed by something, was angry about something. His jaw would set, and he would begin to whistle. Not loudly, but quietly, under his breath, but whistle. And when they walked out the tradesman's entrance, Dr. Cobbs was whistling. He explained to Price on the way home that the hospital in which his patient was a patient had a rule which said that if you were a black physician, you were not allowed to practice inside that hospital, that you had no privileges to do so, and that you would be breaking hospital rules. There were no black patients in the hospital. Therefore, they were breaking hospital rules, and who knows, it could be said that they were perhaps breaking the law. Trespassing, maybe, who knows, I don't know. But in any case, that was the story. When we were talking, Price and I, in his office, I should say that usually these relationships between an author and an editor are long distance. You know, the editor's in New York, the author's in Denver or somewhere, but we both lived in San Francisco, so I got to sit in his office every 2 weeks for about 2 years while he was writing this book, and we talked and talked and talked. That's how we became such good friends. So we were sitting in his office one day, and we were conjecturing about this scene in his book, and a question came into my mind, and I said, "Price, If your father were here today, sitting in that chair over there, and you were able to ask him this question, Dad, you know, given my life, I'm a physician, followed in your footsteps, a psychiatrist, all the work I've done in corporate life, my books, Black Rage, my family, my love for my kids. How do you think I've done, Dad? Is the question I asked Price to consider. What would your father say? Well, Price was startled by my question. And then he began to weep. And he wept, and he wept, and he wept. And I stood up. I wanted to, give him a pat on the back or some sort of commiserative hug or something of that sort. He held out his hands. He asked me to sit down and wait, which I did, for the 5 minutes that he continued weeping. And finally, when he was able to grab himself together, get himself under some sort of control, I said, Price, would you prefer that we do the conversation, we continue the conversation here today, or do you think I should just go home and we'll come back next week and we'll do it then? And he thought for a moment, and then he said, well, Terry, I really do think that you should go home and leave me here alone with my thoughts about my father. It was in that moment that I learned how deeply Price Cobbs loved his father. Of course, I have other stories about his mother who had similar difficulties, but those will have to wait for another day. It was in that moment that I learned how deeply he loved his father and how much he respected his father and how much he sympathized with his father for having to go through the dishonor of merely wanting to practice his profession as a physician and not being allowed to do so. That's a moment I have not forgotten, and I never will. Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Bernard Tyson, and you'll see next to my name in the program for some reason it says featured speaker. So this is an Aretha Franklin moment. If you want to go to the restroom, I'll be talking when you get back, so. Need a little break. It's all good. I'm going to stay within the time limit, roughly. I actually want to speak about Freddie in a moment because I want to give you some advice. Because Freddie is a beautiful woman. She's always been that way ever since I've known her and Price. She has a great personality. She glows. She has a wonderful smile. Beautiful hair. I've never seen her, in a moment where she's not just classy. So I want to come back to that. All right. So I can't tell you how honored I am to stand here in front of you to just share a moment about a mentor and a role model, and literally somebody who is partly responsible for me standing on top of an $80 billion company. My entire career at Kaiser Permanente, Price has been involved in it. My entire career. Price was the one who taught me how to deal with what most black men have, is rage. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know how to define it. I didn't even know how to talk about it. Because of what I had was a strong black father who didn't talk. My father was 70-something years old. He took me out to dinner and he said, son, I love the way you tell your sons you love them. I could not say that to you because I was taught if you love your children, you provide. You go to work. You don't use a lot of words. So Price helped to put things in perspective throughout my career. Every junction of my career, Price Cobbs was there. So one day I finally realized what was going on. Price and I talked about it. I told Price one day, I said, I understand what's happening now. I'm one of your subjects. I said, Price, am I in therapy? Price said, you're in therapy every day. And when you wake up, you're in therapy. When you go to work, you're in therapy. You know, everybody know how Price used to talk, right? You're a black man, you're in therapy every day. When you're by yourself, you're in therapy. You go in the shower, you're in therapy. Yeah, you're in therapy. So Price was the one that taught me every day, I'm in therapy, y'all. He had a way of allowing us to be who we are. He had a way of allowing us to understand we're human like everybody else. We have our fears, we have our moments, and one of the best things that Price did for the collection of us was the Saturday morning family meetings of the ELC. And that was the private time of some of the most powerful African American executives in this country that went into a private room with Price, and we let our hair down, and we talked about how life is for all of us. So we all sit here and honor a man who touched us directly and indirectly. So I will be forever grateful to Price. The final thing is I want to say to Freddie, you're a beautiful woman. I'm going to protect you just like I protect my mama. Ain't no man going to be coming up trying to date you. I heard that you like champagne. So I'll end on this story, Price, just so you know, Freddie, where I come from. So my lovely wife, Denise, and I were visiting my mom. And my mom was talking about somebody was trying to hit on her, and she told me he had crutches and he can't, all this stuff. So Denise said, Mama Tyson said, it is about time for you to date. And my father had passed away maybe about 5 or 6 years. She said, it's about time for you to start dating. So my mom went into my mom's pit. My mom said, honey, I'm not about to date. Honey, I ain't thinking about dating. Let me tell you something, honey. You didn't have a chance to really know my husband, the father of your husband. Honey, he was the best man. He walked on what he did this. He was, honey, ain't no man out there on earth as good as my man. And Denise listened to my mom, and then Denise said, okay, Mama Tyson, I know that. I know that's true. I know there isn't another man out there who has the standard of your late husband. So if you just let your standard down a little bit, I think I can find somebody for you. And I've never seen my mother laugh so hard that day. So I'm watching my wife, and she better not come to you with that. But I know you have wonderful memories of a wonderful man. And I want to thank you for sharing your husband with all of us. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Renata, and I am Price's daughter. Everyone here is a part of our lives in some way. Some of you I know well, some of you I haven't seen for a while, and some of you I've never met before, but I've heard a lot about from my dad. Daddy was a connector, and here we all are connected in some way. Since my dad passed away, I've wavered in my own mind and in my own words to close friends about whether or not I could stand up here and speak at this service. Life without Dad is something I've been afraid of and in some ways mourning since my mom died when I was 13 and my brother Price P. was 15, and in some ways even before that. But in my contemplation and reflection, I finally heard Daddy's clear voice in my head. Get your butt up there. and be the embodiment of what I told you and your brother many times. My greatest goal was to raise you two to continue without me with the strength, values, and resilience I stood for, and exemplified by the life I lived. He would want me to honor him by expressing being what Price M. Cobbs' daughter means. He'd say, "Do me proud. Show clearly that you and your brother are the products of my values, beliefs, and way of being in the world. Walk the talk of diversity in all of its richness, textures, value, and meaning, which lie beneath the surface of the word itself. Teach those not taught by this your examples in every gesture, and in every aspect of your life. Share the importance of reading, learning, and staying informed about what is happening on your front door, in this country, and in other countries. Never give up the fight for social justice and equity for any and all marginalized people and communities. Be appreciative and grateful for all that you and your children have. Don't waste time comparing yourselves to those who have more. Instead, live humbly by comparing yourselves to those who have little or nothing. Know the difference between having everything you need and everything you want. Live by living unselfishly and through giving genuinely of yourself to others in countless ways. Never forget to search for humor in all things, even the sad things, no matter how painful they are. P.S. While I taught you both well the fact that sometimes only the right curse word can truly convey can truly convey a particular emotion, sentiment, situation, or meaning, give no inkling that you are capable of uttering a curse word ever. So Price Cobbs, known as Price P, to Price P and myself as our dad. Dad's vision of a diversity movement was truly in everything that he did as a father. Over the course of the first 18 years of my life, we had 4 different dogs aptly named. Jomo Kenyatta 1, Jomo Kenyatta 2, Sigmund Freud, and Willie Mae. Dad also created an imaginary dog, Roscoe Brayboy, the talking dog, whose captivating stories of extraordinary experiences, travel, and the ability to talk far surpassed the ordinary dog. Mine and Price P's own kids have grown up knowing Roscoe Brayboy intimately through Dad. But with Dad, even ordinary dogs were magic. Jomo Kenyatta, number 2, was a big Weimaraner who, no matter how good we thought he'd been tied up, would escape many nights to roam the streets of Terra Linda. One time, when I was around 7 years old, Jomo did not return home by the morning as usual. Price and I were heartbroken as our parents searched the town for Jomo, but couldn't find him. Finally, someone called from the local rescue shelter. Jomo had been found and was fine. However, we were not allowed to pick him up until the next day. After a day of fear and sadness, at least for me, this burden was too much to bear, and I sobbed and wondered how I would make it through the night. Suddenly, Dad called us all to get in the car. We drove in darkness to the rescue shelter. We stood outside, with Dad being the first one to call out, "Jomo! Jomo!" We all joined in, and from the shelter, suddenly we heard Jomo, "Whoop, whoop," and that got me through the night. After my mom passed, Daddy worked hard to fill in the gaps, ensuring that I continued to grow up as a feminist. Girl power. When I was around 14 or 15, Dad sat me down with seriousness and pride and presented me with the very first edition of Our Bodies, Ourselves, a seminal celebratory user's manual for the female body, written by women for women and girls. He said, "I want you to know that you can come to me in a few years at the point that you think you want to become sexually active." Wow. What a progressive dad he was. Fast forward to my later teenage years. Dad and I sat at the kitchen table, him staring at me reflectively. Finally, he said, "Remember when I told you I wanted you to come to me when you're thinking about becoming sexually active?" I said, "Yes, of course I did." He then said, "Never mind. I don't want to know." Dad shared his love of music with me and Price P. Eventually, he also shared his secret fantasy of being a jazz singer. Now, Dad had a lot of gifts, and some of you might disagree, but I don't think great singing was one of them. Still, he found a way to live out his dream. One year when Price P and I were in high school, Dad decided he was going to stage a jazz concert, starring himself. And only himself, complete with an audience of adoring fans. A friend threw a small party, he found another friend to play the piano, and Dad sang a whole medley of jazz songs while we appreciated and applauded as if he was the most talented jazz singer in the world. Every year on my birthday, after I left home, Dad left the same singing message on my phone, even though we'd always talk as well. It was a verse of happy birthday to you, but the end always was a flashy jazz finish. Happy birthday to you, woo woo. After he and Freddie married, they'd leave the same message as a duet for many years. Each holiday season for years, we went to see Good Time Charlie Brown in concert to hear Merry Christmas, Baby, one of Dad's favorite songs, which he played and sang at home, always wearing a Santa hat. Speaking of Christmas, before images of Santa of color were available, Dad bought this huge plastic Santa head. It was a white man. He then bought some brown paint. We painted the Santa brown and proudly plugged him in for all to see. We grew up eating a wide range of food from other ethnicities and cultures. Out of our own cultural food, Dad's favorite was barbecue. He was an avid barbecue chef as we grew up. When Price and I were teens, he bought a smoker. I don't know if anyone here remembers this giant big smoker. Yeah, it was red, that he was so proud of. He was so inspired by this smoker that he then began bragging to colleagues and friends about his barbecue, because he then used the smoker to perfect the perfect barbecue. From the marinade to the sauce. Took him a long time, but he insisted and was proud that he was the best at it. So Dad then ended up throwing his gauntlet down for a challenge with several other friends for who made the best barbecue. And we had a contest. Dad won the challenge. To Dad, diversity also meant having friends of all ages, including mine. Over the decades, somehow, all of my closest friends somehow became Dad's friends, too. I lived in New York for most of my 20s. I saw Daddy a lot and talked to him on the phone even more. Each Friday, he'd ask me what I was doing that evening. For several years, what I was doing every Friday after work was going to a restaurant called B. Smith's for happy hour with friends. It was where the Buppies hung out. Dad started calling it the office because we went so frequently. And ultimately, he visited the office with us because he wanted to see exactly where I was spending all that time. Probably all of you know better than I that Dad was an avid Facebook user. So I stepped away a little bit ago, but Dad was very into the Facebook. He would update me on what my friends were doing. He'd say, "Oh, I see, Jamie's son Corey is giving a performance in LA and she's there. I see Catherine on vacation with her boys." So he would always have the updates. And he would never, though, post a profile picture. So he kind of just looked like he was lurking. I would remind him of that. You might want to put a picture up, and he was not concerned. And I think that's because he rarely posted. He really reveled in sharing in the joys and experiences of other people, including by my daughter and others. Some of my friends called him for advice on career decisions and sometimes on deeply personal concerns, and Dad honored those confidential conversations with me and everyone else. Many of those friends, as a testament, are here today from all over the country. Finally, just as he did for my daughter Kendall's high school graduation 3 years ago, Daddy was intent on being at my son Christopher's graduation from high school this past June. He flew to Philadelphia for the occasion. Already, he was talking about his desire to make it to New York City for Kendall's graduation from college in 2019. One of my last memorable moments with my dad took place at Chris's graduation. It was on the day before Daddy became ill. Graduation was held outside on the lawn of the school campus with folding chairs set up evenly and flush on the grass. Our group arrived early, and Daddy was always early, so that we could sit right up front. But we found that the first half of the seats were cordoned off for someone else. We were surprised and disappointed, but we found a place in the back. Dad kept asking me who the seats were for, and I said I didn't know. When the procession began, I realized that those chairs were saved for faculty members, and I leaned over and informed Daddy. Chris and his fellow graduates followed next in the procession, walking joyfully to their seats on the podium. As the ceremony began, Dad leaned over to me and whispered, "They need to be giving those seats to you for all that damn money you paid for tuition." One last message from Daddy about my comments today, and I can hear him in my head. Please don't go up there without any lipstick on. This is a pet peeve of mine, as you and Freddie know. Maybe I'm old school, but it looks unfinished and undone. Daddy, I am undone by your passing, but your life, unfinished, lives on in me and all of us who loved you and were loved by you. As our dad, Price was both everything we needed and everything we wanted. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I feel like that's a very hard act to follow, but I will try my best. My name is Kendall Fletcher, for those of you who don't know, and I am the granddaughter of Price M. Cobbs. I guess I just want to start out by saying, looking at all of the people around the room, I truly feel like it is a rare blessing to have someone that reached so many people in so many different professions. I mean, the mayor's office was here. That was pretty cool. And seeing how much one person was able to impact so many people. I just wanted to start out by saying I had the pleasure of spending a week this summer in San Francisco with my grandma Freddie. And while I was there, she gave me a copy of his book, My American Life. And as I read that book, I felt that even though my grandfather had passed, I was able to understand his life in a lot of ways so much more than many people. You know, it's not very often that someone writes a book about their life and you get to read that book post-mortem and understand more about them. And I kind of wanted to talk about some themes from that book and how they relate to my life and the lives of the youth. My grandfather was very big on academic excellence, and he really made a point to instill in me and my brother the importance of academics. One time growing up, my grandfather told me that he would give me $20 for every A that I got on my report card. I didn't get any A's that trimester, but I asked him, hey, would I be able to have $10 for all of the B's I got? he said no. But and through all of that, another memory I want to bring up is when I was applying to colleges, my college counselor told me that she thought that I would not get into any of the schools that I wanted to go to, so why even bother applying to them? And I told my grandfather this, and I wanted to go to NYU because I wanted to be in New York City, and my grandfather said, you should still apply. And he was one of the few people who was in my corner encouraging me to apply to go to NYU. And I ended up going to NYU, and I ended up getting scholarship to NYU. And so without his encouragement, I don't even know if I would be able to say I've done half of the things that I've been able to do. And so another thing that I wanted to share is that my grandfather grew up in LA, and it's something that was a big part of his life. And my first time going to LA, I went with him. And there was something so magical about the city of Los Angeles and something that I connected to on a spiritual level. And I feel it is almost full circle, me wanting to now go and live in LA, in the place where his adventure began. And so I just wanted to bring that up. And so I also wanted to say that the last time that I spoke to my grandfather was shortly after he had first entered the hospital, and my grandmother Freddie had flown out to Philadelphia to be with him, and I spoke to him on the phone. And I was telling him about all the things that I was doing in my life and how he inspired me to start a position in one of my clubs focused on diversity initiatives. And I remember him saying that he was so proud of everything that I was doing, which to me feels like the biggest seal of approval that anyone could possibly give ever. And I just remember in that moment feeling so blessed to have him. And we were talking about how after he got out of the hospital, I was going to come to San Francisco and we were going to eat at that restaurant that I like to go to and all these other things. But unfortunately, we never got to do that. But it was just knowing that he was there and that I was able to be touched by him is something that was so important and special to me. And I hope that in the years to come, those in the future are able to use his words and his guidance to inspire themselves to go after what they believe in and what they feel is right. And I feel that I now feel him whenever I am in situations in the workplace, when I am the only Black person in the office and I'm the intern, and other moments such as those where I feel him speaking through to me and giving me the confidence to speak up about things that I don't think are right and to use my voice to one day help other people too. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Obviously, I'm not Daria, and Maurice just informed me that there's a 2-minute video that's incorporated into my 3-minute remarks. Now, let me get started. The great philosopher, Mike Tyson, once said that everyone has a plan until they get hit. Well, I just got hit, and here's my plan. First of all, I am Ron Parker. I have known Price for almost 35 years, having been an executive for 30 years at PepsiCo, and then supporting the organization as the president and CEO of the Executive Leadership Council. And I would like, Freddie, for you to see the family that has come here today from the ELC and from PepsiCo. So if you would stand, ELC and PepsiCo members, so that we can share with this family the support And we have from the ELC office our newly appointed CEO and president, Skip Spriggs, along with my dear friend Camilla McGee, whom I know had a special place in her heart for Dr. Cobbs. I tell you, I'm a little bit hacked off. Yes, Bernard, I too was that angry black man that was, my wife was said, was out of control. And I'm really hacked off that I have been counseled by this person who got a $29 degree. Talks to an imaginary dog. And I know I've been on the couch a number of times listening to this guy, and this doesn't add up for me, all right? And love jazz, and also love to drink. Just think, EOC members, we got all this great advice from a guy with that kind of profile. No wonder we're messed up. But on a serious note, he was our Yoda. He was our North Star, our North Star. Maurice and I were talking last night at dinner. I said, I had never known a time when Price wasn't available for us. So I will end with this. What are we going to do about it? Are we going to let this heavy drinking, dog talking, $29 psychiatrist just fade away? No. If I had the opportunity to speak with Price, this is what I would say to him. So I'm going to reverse the roles, and then we're going to get into a video. If I was talking to Price, this is what I would say to him, for the most part, Freddie. I would say, God saw that you were tired, and a cure was not to be. So he put his arms around you and he said, come with me. With tearful eyes, we watched you and saw you pass away. Although we loved you dearly, we could not make you stay. A golden heart stopped beating. Hard-working hands have been laid to rest. God broke our hearts to prove to us that he only takes the best. Let's watch the video.
So many times in my work, I say to people that part of understanding stereotypes, understanding one's prejudices, is to really get in touch with who we are most comfortable with. And most of us are most intellectually and emotionally comfortable with people who are most like ourselves. And once we can really get in touch with that, then how do I broaden that? How do I broaden it so that I can get more of an appreciation for difference? And somewhere out there, how do I get to a point where I can begin to value differences?
Everyone knows that leadership positions, C-suite positions, are lonely at best, and they're even more lonely for African American executives. I think there is at no time in the organization's history has it been as crucial as it is now to grow the organization not only nationally but globally. This is a time when diversity and inclusion are really under attack. And ELC is one of the leading organizations leading the fight to make not only the United States but the globe much more inclusive. I want to leave you with one of the favorite phrases of one of my favorite blues singers, and that would be, every goodbye don't mean I'm gone.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our program. We would certainly encourage you to refresh yourself. There's going to be food available. And we want to thank you so much for coming to participate in this celebration for Dr. Price M. Cobbs. Thank you so much for coming.
Hi, my name is Rich Fudge. I've known Price Cobbs for 35 years. He's been a friend, a mentor, a confidant, and a member of our extended family. I first met Price when he talked to my son, Kevin, and he subsequently shared with me the intimacy of confidence and the ability to listen and to learn what a person's aspirations were and what their impediments might have been. And through him, I've learned the art of patience, the art of perseverance, and the art of resilience. And I can't tell you how much Price has meant to me personally, professionally, and the privilege of being his friend.
So my family moved to San Francisco in 1964, and my father was working in the pilot project for the War on Poverty, and I think Dr. Price Cobb was one of the first people we met. And I was just talking to my cousin, and I think part of the reason that they knew each other is because indirectly we are related. He's the sister of my cousin Allison's mother, and they also had a lot of things in common. So I do remember meeting him, and I remember reading his book. And I was going to say this event is pretty historical in that because of the nature of what's happening in San Francisco, a gathering of incredible heavy hitters in the black community is becoming more and more rare in San Francisco. So I'm really proud to be here. I'm really honored that I knew him and that he has a connection to my family. And I'm very happy to be here.
Hi, this is Denise Bradley Tyson, and I was one of those people who was blessed enough to know Dr. Cobbs during his lifetime. And I give thanks for God giving us him, because he touched so many of us in so many ways that his legacy will continue to live on in the form of his disciples and the new framework that he gave us in terms of dealing and navigating our way through, unfortunately, the issues that we as people of color still have to deal with in 2018.
Hi, I'm Doria Ball, and I met Price when I went to the UCLA African American Leadership Conference, and from that point on, throughout most of the key milestones, he was just there, and I just loved him. And so long before I was eligible for ELC, and we were connected even after that point, throughout a lot of the critical moments in my career, he was just there. He always made time for me, and he gave me not wholesale, but the whole part of who I am, he was there. I mean, he coached me through it. I had a 16-year-old nephew. I didn't know what to do when I took co-responsibility for him, and he came through and provided guidance and coaching around that in addition to career stuff. So for that and so many other things that I can't even think of at this moment, I will just love him.
I've so missed Price. And one of the most wonderful memories that I have about Dr. Cobbs was when I was thinking about writing a book and was intimidated about trying to talk to someone who had done that before, and was introduced to Dr. Cobbs. This was about 15 years ago, and he wanted me to spend time with him in San Francisco, and he invited me out, and I came, and we spent the entire day together in his office, having dinner, having lunch. He gave me such great counsel about how to think about my book, how to emphasize it. But one of the things that I'll always remember is I wasn't someone that he knew very well. I reached out to him, and he reached back, and he gave me and poured into me in ways I can't even describe. I will always remember that, and what an example that was for me as a young executive, but also an author. And I've written 2 books, and he even offered to write the endorsement for the first book. Dr. Cobbs was the North Star for all of our Executive Leadership Council members, was a counselor, mentor, and a developer and truth teller that we cherish. We'll always remember him, and our objective is to continue to live out his example as our legacy in response to how he loved us. We love you, Price.
Freddie, I think you know how much Maurice and I love you and love Price. We shall miss him dearly, but we're going to be a part of your life forever. And anything you need or want to talk to me or whatever, you know that all you got to do is text or pick up the phone, and I'll be right there. We love you. Take care, and try to find a way to be happy. Take care. Bye.
I'm Linda Parker Pennington, and on this glorious day we have this tribute to Dr. Price Cobbs, who, as I was telling a friend of mine this morning, is the mentor of my mentor. So Ken Coleman hired me in 1983 when he was head of human resources at Activision. He hired me out of business school, and at that time he said Dr. Price Cobbs was his mentor, and the very next year I was able to take Price Cobbs' course called Career Development Program for Black Managers. So this was 1983. One of the things I remember to this day is Dr. Cobbs said, what you need to do is act as if, because the white boys are out there and they don't have the qualifications and skills that you do, but they act as if they do, and that's how they get ahead. So all you need to do is just act as if. So I want to thank you, Dr. Cobbs, for your wisdom and leaving such a rich legacy for every African American who's been in the corporate sector. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ira Hall, former chair of the Executive Leadership Council, and had many interactions with Price Cobbs. 2 different chapters. First, in 1968, when he came out with the book, Black Rage, I'd taken a leave of absence from a corporate job to do work on social action organizations and activities related to racial discrimination, subsequent economic discrimination. So I knew his book. I used his book to help explain to people what was going on. Later, many decades later, when I became chair of the ELC, Price was just a magnificent consultant to ELC, and he would personally come and we'd have a Saturday morning session. He would take any question from anybody, answer from the soul, but with his psychiatrist background of how to deal with tough situations. Almost anything anybody asked, his answer affected everybody in the room. I learned so much from him. I love him, love Freddie, and he was just absolutely the best, and I'm honored to be here today.
It was a great privilege to meet Dr. Cobbs. I met him in relation to a book I wrote some years ago, and he was one of my first supporters, which I really appreciated. But over the years, we became friends, and I just thought he was a brilliant mind. And one of the most valuable things that I learned from him was in doing my research for the book, I had to read hundreds of African American weeklies from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and I had a lot of questions afterwards, mostly how did African Americans survive all those experiences in one piece. And it wasn't until I read Black Rage that I realized what the legacy was of that. And I just thought Black Rage was a brilliant book. It's a really huge, lasting contribution to American history. And it was such a privilege to know Dr. Cobbs. Dr. Cobbs frequently gave very practical, unemotional advice on how to deal with your career. But he told me one funny story, and that's that how in the corporate world, it's the men who are more stressed out than even the women. And to remember that women are strong and they can succeed.
My name is Allison Rose Jefferson, and I am the daughter of Marcelin Cobbs Jefferson, and she was Price Mashaw Cobbs's older sister, and they grew up in Los Angeles, and they had, and I live in Los Angeles, and they had an older brother named Prince, an older brother named Prince, and their parents were Rosa and Peter Price Cobbs, and they moved. The family was in Los Angeles, and that's where Price M. Cobbs got his upbringing, and some of the things that he has done in his life inspired things that I have done in my life from the standpoint of understanding one's rage, and also in terms of trying to achieve things that some people say that you can't do. And it's amazing that in terms of our family trajectory, in terms of our my grandparents moving to Los Angeles in the 1920s, and how that inspired their children, because even my mother did some groundbreaking things in her own way, and so did my Uncle Prince in his own way. So it's interesting to think about how these family members moving to California were able to produce these descendants who have done these different things than people expected of them. And Uncle Price did many things that were a little more exceptional than some of us, but the things that he did also were very inspirational to not just our family, but also to many other African Americans and white Americans during his lifetime, and his legacy will continue on in the future. And I had many times in my lifetime where I have special memories of hanging out with my Uncle Price, my cousins Renata, and my cousins Renata and Price, and I have memories of Aunt Evadne, and I have memories of Freddie as well that are very warm, and I wish everyone a wonderful rest of whatever their existence is.
When I recall Price, obviously a lot of people know about him and how he's impacted many of us throughout corporate America and dealing with all the various ups and downs that that road has to offer. And he's sort of been our mentor to many people every step of the way. But the thing I most remember about Price and Freddie is the personal relationship you tend to have, and when you have your own down times. And I remember I was going through a major struggle with my family and my wife at the time, and I was out here, and Price sat down with me and coached me through it, and just helped me through in probably the most difficult times of my life. Nothing compared to those trying times with family, and at that point I knew that Price was more than a consultant, a friend, a confidant. He was truly a special person, and myself and every member of my family owe him a great bit of everything that we can ever dream and hope to be in the future.
Price was an amazing guy. We learned so much from him. He taught us how to be ourselves. He was one of these kinds of people who you always wished was in your life in some way. He helped all of us enormously. He was not judgmental. He was always supportive. And he always told us that, quite frankly, whatever we got, we deserve. Whether or not that was our silence or whether or not that was speaking out on things that mattered to us. I'm just part of a small generation of people he helped along the way in corporate America. I happen to think corporate America is a better place because of people like Price Cobbs. I know that I'm a better person today because of Price Cobbs. I'll miss him a lot.